consider that word and just kind of write down some things that means to you. I want you to think about it. I want you to think about maybe defining it a little bit, thinking through how it impacts you, what connection it has to your work, and just consider that for a minute. And then we'll go to breakout rooms in just a minute, and we'll have an activity for you. But right now, I just want you to think about the word accommodations. Leave out modifications. Just think about accommodations and think about how that connects to your work and what it means to you and that type of thing. So we'll take about a minute and we will consider that, and then we're going to send you to some breakout rooms. So as you're considering accommodations, we want you to think about it. We want you to then write about it just on your own. And then we're going to pair you up in some breakout rooms and have you share your answers with others. And then if you consider that, and if you learn something from one of your colleagues, we want you to rewrite what you have on your paper, or restructure it a little bit, or add to it. And then be prepared within your group to share out. And so I would leave it to you guys, when we put you in the breakout rooms, to use the person that has the most experience in your breakout room will be the person that will share back with the main group when we come back together. Okay, so I'm going to give you just another moment to coordinate here. Think about the activity, think about accommodations, how it connects to your work, what it means to you, what you think it maybe means, and then just get ready to go to the breakout rooms. So we're going to have about 6 breakout rooms, and the activity is to take your thinking and your writing with you, pair up with your colleagues, have a discussion, share out, and then rewrite, and then be ready to share to the group. So we're going to breakout rooms right now. Equality being everybody's getting the same thing. Equity means giving people what they need. And so we see this, and we see the scaffolds built, and we really see a great representation here visually that helps us to understand this, that, you know, we have to meet our students where they are. We have to give them individualized accommodations and what they need. Thank you guys so much for that. So equity then is, again, just going back and circling back behind this to clarify any maybe misconceptions that anyone may have had. Equity, that is, that they give each student what he or she needs to successfully complete a given learning task or assignment. By promoting equity, teachers can break down the barriers that interfere with students' opportunities to access learning. Equality is giving every student precisely the same thing. We may have the best intentions there, but we know that's not how the real world works. However, by doing so, educators inadvertently limit the opportunities of students with disabilities to access learning if we do not do some ongoing monitoring of what's needed and really figuring out what's going on with our students to provide them with the best possible accommodations. So, you know, there's this whole thing that, and Brenda and I have this discussion, and I would like Brenda, if she's available right now, to weigh in on this if she wants, because instructional accommodations are changes to the delivery of the classroom instruction or the accompanying materials. Instructional accommodations change how students learn, but do not change what they learn. In other words, they do not alter the scope or range of grade level academic content standards, nor do they change the complexity of the knowledge that students are expected to learn. So the whole idea of everyone doing the state test that is working toward a diploma is to have them demonstrate what they know and to provide them accommodations. But we can provide lots of accommodations in the classroom for everyone. That, you know, they don't have to have an IEP to get the accommodations, and we can do all kinds of accommodations for these students as we diagnose what they need. We can provide those. So instructional accommodations differ a little bit from state and district testing accommodations in that, you know, we don't have to be checking to make sure they're eligible for it. We don't have to be checking to make sure that we've been doing it all the time, that kind of thing, that there's a current IEP on hand and that it's been documented in the lesson plan and all those things. So it's really, really important to remember that instructional accommodations differ just a little bit. So here's some examples of instructional accommodations: large print, assistive listening device, repeated or paraphrased instructions, or maybe even something as simple but as much needed as a pencil grip to help a student to be able to use that pencil in the correct way to do the task, the learning task, and to something that the social emotional part of this sometimes we want to give our students what they need, and we want to remove any kind of social emotional impact on our students. And our students want to be just like anyone else. They want to be able to do things, and so we have to continually be empathetic and work toward a classroom that is open to the use of that. And that's why sometimes it's good maybe just to have a bunch of people using these accommodations if they need them, and people that may or may not be in special education using these accommodations. So instructional accommodations, we tell people we want you to formatively assess, we want you to provide some things, some scaffolds for folks, and it may be as simple as a pencil grip. So anyway, that's one of the things that we wanted to hit, as we move through. So moving on, testing accommodations are changes to the format of the test, providing test in large print or its administration procedures, permitting extended time to complete the test. Testing accommodations change how students are tested, but do not change what a test measures. Students with disabilities who receive testing accommodations are required to take the same assessment and reach the same level of proficiency as students who do not use them. So when we look at, maybe our own writing, and if we had a lot of time today, we only had an hour and a half, so a lot of the interaction, it might put this one up on the left, the accommodations non-specific, and then have you turn that into a specific one, if you will. That would have been really a good thing for me to do. We could have done that pretty quickly. So I'm looking at my own teaching here, and you constantly have to do that too. You constantly have to check: are we learning? Are we learning permanently? Are we being able to recall the information that we've learned? That type of thing. So when we look at these non-specific examples, we may reflect on our own writing, and we may know what we intend for them to understand as someone that's picking this up. We talk lots of times in special education and IEP development about passing the stranger test. Okay, we want teacher B over here in Floyd County to be able to pick up from teacher A over here in Owsley County an IEP and be able to implement it and know what's going on with it. And so when we write accommodations, let's say if we said something like student will receive extra time on assignments, a better way to do that might be more specifically to say the student will have time and a half for completing all in-class assignments in math and science. So we make it a little more specific, and we tell exactly what's going on so that everybody knows what everybody knows, and that we have made it pass that stranger test once again. Students will receive preferential seating. Well, that doesn't tell us really where he's going to be seated, why, what's the, where it's going to be, that type of thing. So student will be seated in the front row away from the door for all core subjects, when it's going to occur, and that kind of thing. So we can really think and reflect on our own work. And I've written a lot of IPs in over the last 32 years. And I'm telling you what, guys, I'm glad you all are not looking at my IPs that I wrote, because I've learned so much over the years, and it's just continuous work in progress. And we're always reflecting on what we're trying to get. What's the why behind the IEP? What's the how behind the disability adverse effect? All those kinds of things. So we have to really think deeply, and it's not just copying and pasting something for the sake of having it meet and check a box. So, it's really, really important as we move through. And here are some more examples, some things that you might be able to take home with you. Accommodations for students with ADHD. You've probably heard of this one: chunking large assignment. This is a student that has difficulty maybe putting the brakes on or being able to get organized well enough to do a large assignment. So maybe we would cut that down, give it in manageable pieces, and give them some differing assignment dates. And so we chunk that large assignment, divide the large assignment into smaller parts. That's for a student that may have ADHD. Okay. Then on the other side of the coin, we may have some that have anxiety, and we provide for them if it's something that we feel like the student can handle responsibly, and we teach them the correct behaviors. We can allow them to have a flash pass. Maybe they have anxiety. They need to be removed from the situation for a minute to gather themselves, to practice their breathing techniques, to just let the anxiety attack get to the crescendo. And so that we know that when it gets to the crescendo and we teach them that it's going to subside. Providing frequent breaks. You know, we just have to sometimes we have to let students that are hyperactive release some energy and then refocus them on the task. Seating at the front, easier to monitor the symptoms and respond to students' needs. So we're back on the anxiety side here. And we're looking at, if we have a student, maybe they need to be up there close to where we can monitor. Maybe we can see some of those common behaviors that are associated with that anxiety attack and help that student. Schedule time for rechecking work. This is a big one for all students, I think. I teach class, and I get to try out some of these strategies and things that I learn. And when I teach this class, one of the key things for monitoring understanding is to have those students schedule them some time to relook at their work, to redo and edit, that kind of thing. And really, particularly for students with ADHD or ADD, they really need it scheduled, okay? Intentional reworking, editing time, okay? So rechecking your work. And then prioritizing tasks, differentiate what's most important and what's urgent, better time management, okay? So we were looking at, hey, how does this student manage their time? If they're constantly late with their assignments, if they're constantly not getting everything done, or it's really messy or whatever, differentiate what's most important and what's urgent and have them do those things first and kind of give them that graphic organizer so that they can keep up with what they're learning as they go. Over here on the anxiety side, I've got a couple more. Building time for the counselor. Once or twice a week, it helps maybe with some consistent, regular monitoring of the anxiety. Help that student to, have someone to share with. If you can get that consistent relationship going and you really share maybe once a week or twice a week, that. And then there's that breathing techniques was the other. Allow them to step to the hall to use those breathing techniques to refocus themselves and get through that possible hard time that they may be having. So what I'm going to do right now is I want to do this. We're at 2:32. I want to try this with you guys. What I would like to do is I would like for you to consider the information without going to the breakout room. And then I would like for you to consider the information in a silo with you, yourself, and you. And I would like for you to answer or fill up the block with examples, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to use the chat feature. And after it's 2:32, we'll spend about 2 minutes on this and see what you can come up with. This is a barrier related to the way information is presented, either through text, lecture, or video. It's a presentation accommodation allows a student to access information in ways other than the standard visual or auditory means. It's changing the way that instruction, directions, and information are presented. So it's a presentation accommodation, and we want you to think outside the box. And we really want it be a share site, a gathering site, if you will, so that we all can know what you guys know. And maybe we haven't thought about an example to include here. So maybe you can give us one that you use. So if you would, you can do that now. Within the next, I'm gonna say at 2:35, we'll do that waterfall again, and you can put it in simultaneously. Come up with 1 or 2 examples, if you will, and maybe it's things you haven't heard already. And if it's things you've heard already and it's things you use and you feel strongly about it, go ahead and put it in there. But we're just trying to hear what you've got to say about presentation accommodations and working with the information here a little bit to check for some understanding. We're coming up on 2:35, so start dropping in the chat now. Go ahead and continue to put your accommodation that you come up with. What accommodation to overcome presentation barrier, the way information is presented. If you can't use the chat feature, would you like to share auditorily for us? Danielle Aldrich, I can see your face because your screen is on. That's good. So you got picked on by me. do you care to speak to that a little bit? I know you work with a specific population, and we'd like to hear from you.
I typed in the chat, Denny May. You can't call on me too.
Oh, you put it in the chat. Awesome. I see it now. It just popped up. It's slow. We're having, it must be windy in Eastern Kentucky today or something. I don't know. It's blowing Zoom around. So she says, go ahead. Why don't you talk about it? Go ahead and tell us what you said in chat there, Danielle.
So I teach children who have visual impairments. So our accommodations are very different, I guess, are very precise.
Precise, yes.
So like we make accommodations of getting our kids if information's on the board. We usually give them a copy of the notes, so they have it in front of them. And we can do large print or braille versions. And we always make sure there's high contrast. So we always recommend usually to use black on the whiteboard and make sure there's no glare. And we sometimes provide like tactile symbols of information. So like if you're doing a reading story or like teaching sequencing, sometimes we make symbols for like the steps that happen in the story so the kids can have the materials tactile.
That's awesome. So this is all presentation driven. The student has, in this case, it's vision impairment. And so we have to think about that and how we're going to accommodate. We really appreciate that, Danielle. Very good. We're having a little bit of difficulty and with hearing, but great answer. Great answer. Ashley Sample from Pikeville says to stay focused will be concise and simple directions. The use of paraphrasing is a strong tool. Visual cues or auditory cues to highlight information. Christy Dixon says if a child can't present verbally, he might be permitted to use an augmentative communication device. Very good. Pairing together peers that are good role models from Tabitha Craft and will be able to help model good behavior. So lots of good answers there. Okay.
Hey, Denny, what about models? Like, can that kid construct a model if you're talking about a different, versus the standard way to present the information they learned?
That's perfect. And that also is maybe providing another way for the student to get it, thinking about universal design for learning, given those options and choices sometimes are very powerful for students. We want to build that into our lessons, that design, that grand design up front. If we're preparing for accommodations, maybe we can have that in our toolbox, and we can be ready to provide that as a way of providing choice, as a way of providing an upping interest, and that type of thing. And
a lot of our kids, Denny, like to use video if they don't like to present in front of other kids or they're nervous or something, and we let them videotape their responses prior to, and they do better.
Thank you, Kimberly. I appreciate that very much. That's a great answer. So she was talking about the use of video and the students creating videos. We know that students today love technology. We have a ton of technology, assistive technology, those types of things. And we really are supposed to be considering assistive technology first. When we're developing our IEPs, we should be ruling out and making sure that we can't use an assistive technology first before we go to the other types of traditional types of accommodations modifications. A voice amplifier, Bronna says, for the classroom helps HI students especially. And also, I would say, and I'm glad you said that, Bronna, because it reminds me, sometimes those FM systems, teachers need training in that. So you have to consider that up front with your IEP development. How much training do you need to go along with these different types of assistive technology? And the things that Danielle mentioned, she's going to be very astute in it, but maybe we need to have that transfer or generalize to another location. And so Danielle's got to go in and maybe train that regular ed teacher in the use of this particular, assistive technology device. So very powerful stuff today that we're talking about here. We got an A+ group. I am so happy to be acquainted and associated with all of you guys, and I appreciate all your answers. And if I didn't get to you, I apologize. For the sake of time, we've got about 19 minutes left, and I'm going to move on to the next one. So breakout room 2, the way in which students is required to respond, okay? That's the barrier. A barrier related to a way in which students are able, so this is the response accommodations. And response, the reminder here is response accommodations allow students to complete assignments or assessment through ways other than typical verbal or written responses. So please weigh in. Let's take about up to 244. And then if you don't care to waterfall that into the chat, then we'll consider some of the things you said. And then if people want to auditorily give us their answers, that just helps our session. And we love hearing from you guys because I get tired of hearing myself talk. So now the students responding, and there's a barrier because of their disability. What are some examples of ways we can overcome that? I got about 240, 230. I'm going to give you till about 244, and at 244, at the top of 244, we'll waterfall it into the chat. Give us some good examples, what you're using out there in KVEC land. We like hearing all around from all the different areas that are represented today. We appreciate you being here so much. It's the augmentative device for speech impairment, sign language to impart the information, flip grids, speech to text, submit a video instead of writing answers. Those are all picture exchange communication system. Visual impairment accommodations for responding. This is from Danielle. Typical answers that are provided with a written response. A lot of my students use bold line or raised line paper to be able to write on. Other students use the voice typing tool in Google Docs to be able to speak their answer, speech to text. Students who use tactile symbols as their mode of communication can use their symbols board to share their answer. That is excellent. Speech to text video response from Sharon Thornsberry. Thank you. Picture exchange choice boards, Tabitha Craft. Kristen Quillen, speech to text. Brandon Garrett, slant board. Very good, very good. Speech to text from Zane Blair. We really appreciate your answers. For the purpose of moving on, and we're running short on time, I'm going to move on. If I had a little more time, we would talk more in depth and use some more, maybe look at the setting and the timing and scheduling types of accommodations that we need. But, you know, with Kentucky assistive or Kentucky testing accommodations, we have to consider these areas right here. And so this is one thing I want you to think about. It's when you're thinking about your applying accommodations to students with disabilities or with 504 plans, make sure they're meeting the eligibility criteria for that accommodation. We don't want to miss, we don't want to give an accommodation when it's not needed, I guess is what we're trying to say. We don't want to apply a reader if a reader is not needed. Our whole goal with accommodations is to set those accommodations strong early on in the student's career and then begin to fade those accommodations away and to develop independence as we move to those ages in which we are seeking to move into adulthood. So just think about that. And then making sure that there's a current IEP or 504 plan in place, and the student must be receiving the accommodation on a consistent basis. That doesn't say daily, but it's consistently, they're consistently getting it. And implementers must have the accommodation documentation in the lesson plan. And so that's just a really quick go over with that. Here's some additional information. Become familiar with each student's needs. Review the student's IEP. Know the student's strengths and weaknesses. I'm not going to read these slides for you, but this presentation is available for you, and it's got some good tips about becoming familiar with students' needs. And if you're new to the game and you need some really sure up, you can go back and read this, and it can really help you be aware of becoming aware of meeting the student where they are. You have to assess, find out where they are. We have to determine that, put that in the present level, and then seek to overcome those barriers through good, strong goals, and then also good, strong accommodations. Be knowledgeable of the student's device. Again, we talked about this a little bit before. You know, some of this stuff is really technologically advanced. Some of the things that we see that students need and they're out there and available, maybe the teacher just needs a little, we're intimidated by it a little bit because we don't know about it. Maybe we need to build a little relationship with those teachers that will be implementing. And we provide them with some tools in which they can use this. The student may need to be able to learn to use it. We may need to be able to learn to check and make sure and monitor that the student's getting something from the accommodation. So be sure to think about that. And like I said, this is available to you, you know, in the presentations and in the interactive agenda that we gave you this afternoon. Stay up to date, attend trainings about accommodations to understand specific policies and guidelines for your state. Now, we realize there's an inclusion of special populations training that's totally different than this, but this kind of gets you grounded into it. And so, you know, your district lots of times will provide that training for you. And so we've got the website at the end that you know, KDE, where there's lots of slides and lots of information about student-specific accommodations on state testing, because it gets a little wonky, it gets a little harder, and we get a little bit intimidated by the process, especially for new teachers. And we're implementing, and we're the proctor of that test for the first time. You know, sometimes we just have to really slow down. So I wanted to give you that information and have that accessible for you as well. So read professional journals, visit reputable websites, you know, all kinds of things you can do there. Evaluating the effectiveness of accommodations. Once a teacher begins to implement an accommodation, he or she should monitor whether it is having the desired impact on students' performance. And, you know, we can look at this and there's some information here, some really good information here about checking to see the number of times the behavior occurs within a given time frame. We would be looking at behavior here and the different ways we would measure that behavior. And then step 2, we would collect the data on the student's performance, and we would determine the baseline on that performance. The teacher should first collect baseline data on the aspect of student's performance she wishes to change. So it's useful to use this within the realms of accommodations as well, and to know what a student can do with accommodation and without the accommodation. You should be testing that back and forth and determining how much you can fade it over time. And you should have data to support your fading. You really should. And so this is what this is all about. And this is just some tips about doing that. Step 3, collect the data during implementation of the accommodation. While implementing the accommodation, the teacher should collect data on the student's performance using the same method used to collect the baseline data. Once the accommodation has been implemented, a good rule of thumb is to collect 4 to 6 data points. Have you heard that before? Yes. So this is the same kind of thing we would do with progress monitoring. It's the same, if that's what we're talking about. So then evaluate the effect of the accommodation. The teacher can compare the implementation data to the baseline data and evaluate whether or not the accommodation is producing the desired effect. Is it getting where we want it to get? Is it providing the needed scaffold, the needed access? Because the idea is to give the student what they need. And if it's not working, there's no point in continuing it, right? So we got to really think about it intentionally. And I know it's just another thing to think about, but it's really important. And then I said, consider Liam. Each day, Liam's science teacher, and I got this from the Iris Peabody website. Each day, Liam's science teacher devotes the first portion of the period to independently reading a section of the textbook before discussing it with the class. Recall that Liam has difficulty finishing science reading assignments in the class in the allotted time due to his, look at the highlighted material, his difficulty reading standard print materials. Okay, what kind of accommodation, or is that a presentation accommodation? He's having to read the material, so how we're presenting the material to him may need some adjustment. So a digital textbook that allows him to enlarge its text may be the presentation fix that we need here. So if we were just looking at him, we would do the steps again, determine how to measure the expected outcome, collect the baseline data, collect implementation data, compare implementation data to the baseline data. And this is what it would look like as we're taking this data. The baseline data on the left, and he could read that many number of pages without any kind of accommodation, he only gets 40%. And you see on 9.4, he gets 40%. And then you average those raw data and come up with a baseline. And then you compare that baseline information to what happens once he gets that digital reader. Now look at the difference. Is it being effective? I think so. So we just see that, and then there it is graphed, pre-accommodation, post-accommodation. We see that the dates are down here arranged. We see that the percent of the text read is over here, just like we would do with progress monitoring. So talking about modifications and how they are different. Modifications are adaptations. If we had time, I'd put you in a breakout room, let you talk about it, discuss it, write about it, and come up with that. But we're just going to talk through this and talk through the rest of the slides because we're running a little thin on time today. Modifications are adaptations that change what students learn and are used with students who require more support or adjustments than accommodations can provide. It alters the content or the number of skills involved in a lesson. Whereas accommodations level the playing field, modifications change the playing field. Unlike accommodations, modifications do change the expectations for learning, and they do reduce the requirements of the task. And here's just a little example of what some of that might look like. You look at the disability category, you look at the bearer that's presented. Most of those are presentation. The bottom one is a response accommodation, but we're talking about modifications here. So we're talking about those response modifications. Look, the orthopedic impairment, writing out responses due to inability to hold a pencil, we may give them a shorter report. They may get fatigued. We give them a shorter report. Remaining focused, fewer homework questions. Specific learning disability, decoding text, read a lower level book. So you can see that the content is being modified, and that's what a modification is. And the learning expectations are being changed. There's the two resources, Kentucky Department of Education. And on the interactive sheet, I have this KDE Inclusion of Special Populations portal hot link for you. You can go there and you can see, and I'll do it for just a real quick second here because we're coming down to the end. But you can see that they have a whole page dedicated to assessment regulations training. They've got PowerPoint modules over here for administrative code. And they've got what we're really interested in, which is making sure that we've got to do the administrative code training every year. And then we've got to make sure that we understand inclusion of special populations. And the tests change, the test vendors change. So we got to keep up on it. Being a professional special educator means that we got to stay in tune with the training modules. And your district has responsibilities to make sure that you do this and you sign off and that you've been trained before you administer any of these tests. So, we can look at one, like the inclusion PowerPoint is here. It's kicking me back out for some reason. Not wanting to take me there, probably because I'm sharing my screen. But at any rate, you can see that there is ample information there. If you have questions about administering a particular accommodation during a state testing, this is the place to go to do the background reading. This is the place to go to get yourself up to speed, and then listen to your DAC for announcements on when you're going to have that special inclusions training and accommodations training provided for you. Any questions you can put in the chat. We do have feedback. Go ahead, Dion.
I had one question that came up, and I just wanted to put that out there for clarification on that one.
Okay.
But somebody had asked me about clarification on whether or not a student has to ask for accommodations during testing.
If they have to ask for
their accommodations.
Those accommodations are supposed to be readily available, and I don't think they have to ask for them. I think you provide them. Is my, if it's on the IEP, you're supposed to be providing those. They do not. And there's lots of information in these inclusion documents that talk about the special situations that come up, the Q&A, and we don't have time to go into it today. because it's very technical and it's very detailed. And you have to, the reason I wanted you to see this is if you really want to do a good job of providing the accommodations that your students need for state testing, you need to do the background reading here. And you need to make sure that you have some prior knowledge before you go to the training. And I know that's just another thing for you to do. And I know you got a million things to do, and I know you got big jobs. And I really appreciate you guys being here today. It's springtime. We would love to be outside, I think, and enjoying this great weather that we're having in Eastern Kentucky today. But we're here and we're doing this and we're doing what we need to do to be professionals. And KVEC's always here for you. And if you have specific questions about inclusion after you go through the training, if you'll get those questions to us, we'll do our best to see that we clarify anything that you may have a misconception on or something that we need to reach out to the State Department for. We would love to do that for you. Dion and Brenda talk to the State Department almost on a daily basis, if not more, and if that's possible. So they're in constant contact with them, and we can get clarification on lots of things. So I think there is a feedback form that's attached to this, and we would ask that you fill that out so that we can get some feedback. We're always looking to get better. We don't have all the answers, but we're working hard to provide you with the support that we know what it was like to be a teacher of special education. We know what it was like to be an administrator of special education. And we know that you have one of the most difficult jobs there is on the planet Earth. And especially during a pandemic, we want to be here for you. And we're going to try. We got a tremendous staff. Really appreciate all the staff being with us today, starting with Dion Bates and Brenda Combs, our leaders at KVEC, and everyone else that joined. Chastity had such a good anecdote, and we had Bronna Francis on with us, and we had Doug Smith, and we had Vonda Adams and Stephanie Kidd, and so very, very. And if I left anybody out, please, you guys can chastise me and correct me tomorrow.
So Vonda, thank you to Vonda Adams, and she dropped the evaluation link in the chat. So if you can complete that evaluation, that's important for us to collect that, and it's part of the way we collect our data. So if you don't mind to do that, and then in just a second, we'll get you access to the information you need about the certificate.
We want to honor your time, and we've had a packed day today. I had training from 9 to 12 with KDE, and then we had a representative from KDE doing a PBI so that many of you guys did, and then this training. So it's been a day of learning, and I love to learn, and I love to learn with you. And so I just really appreciate your input, and I really appreciate you responding, because when we hear from you, it's so much better. It's so much better when we hear from you, and we appreciate it very much. We need to pause for just a minute, Dion, and wait.
Yeah, Vonda is getting ready to drop the certificate for you, the link to the certificate, I think, in the chat right now, so that you'll have the link to that.
Yes, Dion, I went ahead and dropped.
You already
both
have?
in there, 'cause
Okay.
I saw Christy had to leave.
Okay.
So if
Okay.
please make sure that you do both for us. We need your feedback, of course, with the evaluation, and then the accommodation modification certificate link. That's how you'll get your certificate for today.
Vonda, we really appreciate you doing that for us.
Oh, you're welcome.
So I overlooked that, Vonda. So it's down there below that. So my apologies. I overlooked it. I was looking for it, but I thought it was the other one. So so this time you should be able to just click on that and then get access to your certificate for today. We hope that make it a little easier step for you.
Dion,
that was very easy, actually. It worked really well.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate that feedback.
Good. Good. That may be the best way to do that. We're trying out different things. That may be our best way that was the first time we've done it that way. So
It worked great.
good. And you're welcome, Sharon. I seen Christy, everybody. Thank you all for being, I know you all have been with us on several of those sessions for our winter conference and our spring conference. And we appreciate your feedback. We appreciate your time. Thank you guys for hanging in there with us. It was a busy afternoon.
Very busy. But we love doing it. And we do appreciate you. And Dion, if we have nothing more, I guess we can end the meeting today, and we'll see you around the horn. We'll holler at you. And I appreciate that very much. I would say to me, it is one of the number one things we need to do for documentation of due
Yes.
process. And it's something that we need to keep continually updating. If you can get to one of those trainings that we provide, either face-to-face, in a virtual mode, asynchronously, whatever it is, familiarize yourself with the record review. That's really your baseline for documentation. And I've done Brent and I have been working on this annotated document for record review and just putting all kinds of things in there. And we've really taken a step toward making sure that we include the low incidence populations in that regard too, for folks that are on alternate, and making sure that we got that new information there, because that continually changes. And, and we'll use also the IEP coaching tool that all the folks at KVEC had a hand in developing. And, we used Brenda's brilliance and her thinking behind a lot of the information that's there. It's an annotated document right on the IEP document itself. And we really finding and hearing, we're getting great feedback from people that have been using that document. It's been helpful and useful in developing IEPs, especially for those folks that have very little experience.
Okay,
And
great.
what we've been doing with that is we've been using the document itself, the record review document, the annotation on the record review document, and then the annotated IEP, because the focus is present level at the state level. KDE's focus is on present level, getting the present level correct and making sure that we're getting present level and following up with goals and services. And so what we've been doing is having you look through a folder and just kind of comparing your work to what's on the screen. So it's a good day.
If you're
All right.
interested.
Anything else? Anybody have anything to say? It's been a great day. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.